What's up, everyone? It's Chase Roboy with GamePlan for your academics. So today we're going to be talking about studying less for higher grades. So I see a lot of people, they have trouble with school, they put so much value on their grades, and I really think that there's more to life than just studying. And you shouldn't be so upset when you get one bad grade in the big picture of things. So this is going to be the first video in a series where I walk through how I view studying, my philosophy on studying less for higher grades, and I'm going to present to you how I think that school basically overall should be approached. And I'm going to walk through how to make your life as easy as possible. I'm going to break down 3 tips today on just the big picture, and this is going to set the foundation for the next video in the series. So stay tuned. I hope you like what you hear. All right, so the first point is that time does not equal preparation. And this is really difficult for people to grasp because a lot of times they think, oh, I'm going to try to get better grades, so I'm just going to study more. Well, it's really upsetting whenever you study all this time and then you get your grade back and then it's garbage. So whenever this happens, you got to be familiar, or like you have to at least consider the idea that time alone is not the only variable in making sure you can guarantee your success. So whenever you look at it like that, you think, okay, then what does guarantee my success? It's that preparation component. So that preparation component, I'm going to define that as how well do you understand the material? Are you comfortable with it? Have you gone through all the material? Do you actually know things? So this is really hard for people to grasp because they want to memorize things. And when you memorize things, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually learn. And it's almost subconscious when people approach it this way because they think, okay, I need to know these things. And they only see it as just individual things and they just memorize. And teachers do kind of a bad job of explaining why this is because they just say, oh, don't memorize, but they don't really break down what that means. What this means for a lot of people is they're not looking at the material and seeing how it's associated, walking through it in their head and trying to figure out, okay, why does this matter? And establishing why it matters, that's a really big component. So I would urge you to focus on preparation in that regard rather than just how long you study. So getting to a place where you're more prepared can come through how many times you've gone through the material, but I would have better metrics like how well could you explain it to somebody? How well can you explain it to yourself? Do you understand how everything fits together? Could you apply it to the world? Think of like these bigger things, and it's going to make it a lot more fun for you to study, and you're also going to be so much more prepared. And at the end of the day, if you're still not sold on time not equaling preparation, I'm going to say that you might fall into one of these groups. So some people like to brag about how much they study, and it's kind of fun because like no one actually cares how much you study. No one actually even cares like what grades you get. And maybe you have a parent that like really cares about you getting good grades. Maybe they want you to be a doctor because you're get you on the pre-health track, whatever. And they're going to see grades as basically a short-term stepping stone until this long-term goal. And this is nice, but it gets people fixated on only the grades whenever there's so much more that goes into all these other things that are in your future. So even though grades do have short-term significance, in the long term, they're not the only thing. So whenever viewed that way, if we're talking about preparation for the long term as well, we need to make sure we clear up time aside from studying so we can focus on what are those other things that prepare us for our future. So that comes into the philosophy that I'm going to discuss in the rest of this series. And I'm going to make sure that people study less so they have more time for a more meaningful life because it's not all about school. So because it's not all about school, maybe we want to get through it kind of fast. So the second point is going to be speed. So when we're talking about speed, I'm not talking about just like hustling through the information. I'm talking about trying to really challenge yourself. Like hustling through the information isn't just getting through it. It's making sure that you're pushing the pace for what you can, like what your capabilities allow for. And whenever you're pushing the pace for what your capabilities can allow for, you'd be locked in. You'd be focused because it's more of a challenge at this point. And it's not just like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Like I'm just gonna do it until it gets done. That mindset's going to slow you down and you're going to take your time. You're probably not going to be engaged. You're probably going to spend twice as long and learn half as much. Whereas if you went fast, you're fully engaged. Half the time, you get the full amount of effective studying in. That's really powerful because if you get an hour a day extra that you can do and use for yourself, because we'll count this as still like productive hours. If you have more productive hours in the week because you study less, you have more time to focus on your personal growth. You have more time to focus on your skills. You have more time to think about your future, plan for your future. All these things are very important. No one's going to tell you this. Everyone's just going to tell you, oh, you need to go to school, you need to like get good grades, and then you're going to just be successful. But it doesn't work like that. So I want to make sure that we're getting through that material fast. We're staying engaged. We're actually trying to learn things, because again, it's going to clear up more time for us to study. So by first point, time does not equal preparation. We're going to make sure that we're not focused on solely putting in time into our studying. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, how much do we have to do? Let's see how quickly we can go through it. We're not rushing. We're not being sloppy about it, but we are trying to push the pace and just get it done. It's just another task in all the things that you have to do in the world. It should be like anything else. There's certain things that you don't want to do, but you get it done, and then you get the rewards later. So this is kind of a concept that we're going to go more into in the future. So go through the material fast, and you're going to like what you see. Now, speaking of seeing, are you seeing the big picture? The big picture is really hard for people to grasp, mainly because they never look at it. A lot of people like to get focused on the small details. What this would be called is missing the forest for the trees. And when you miss the forest for the trees, you get really locked in on details that might not be obviously associated with other details. You might completely misunderstand the significance of a piece of information. And this is painful because you have a lot of kids who are very smart, and they're going to study, they're going to memorize a ton of things. They have a ton of specific details. They have a ton of trees, but they don't have a forest because they don't understand the big picture. They don't understand what they've learned, why anything they learned has any significance, how anything fits together. It's just discrete, non-connected pieces of information. So when we look at it like this, we see the value in the big picture, because the big picture brings everything together. And when you have everything together, you're going to have a much easier time looking at the material, learning the material, retaining the material after the test. Because a lot of times the people who memorize are really good at forgetting it just a couple days later. Hey, I do it sometimes. But whenever it comes to things that you might actually want to know for later on, it's really important to try to figure out that big picture. Maybe you don't care about your grades at all, and for some reason you're watching this video. If that's you, like, if you could just get the big picture, you probably know more than those smart kids at the end of the week, because they will have already forgotten everything, and you'll actually walk away with something because you're actually trying to learn things just to know things. Knowing things is really helpful, and if you can apply big picture concepts to other things in the world, you can do some cool things. So I would urge people who don't look at the big picture at all to use the big picture, first of all, to speed up study, because when you see how everything fits together, you can put it in faster. But number two, like, if you actually know things at the end of the day, you're going to be so much more competent as a person. You're going to be able to problem solve better. You're going to know how the world works even better. And this should really be the point of school, this know-how. So I would really urge you to look at the big picture first, and then put in these specific details. So in practice, when you're looking at the big picture, it's really easy to know if you understand the big picture if you can explain it to somebody else. And you're trying to not just tell them a bunch of things. If you ever explain a subject to your parents and you just kind of tell them what you learned, you tell them things, but like in their brain, they don't really care because they don't know why it matters. But if you sell it in a way where you're saying, this is why it's important, this is why it's applicable to your life, this is why it might change the way you view the world, that's a lot more interesting. So look at the big picture, explain it in understandable terms. That means you can simplify it. That means you know it really well. And say, for example, that someone actually does get interested in what you have to say, then you can give them the small details. But this is just like studying and just like taking a test. You get the big picture first, and if the details are required, that's when you learn them. But I would say the big picture is the most important. So keep your focus there, then details, and then go back and refine and try to do all this fast. Try to do it in as little time as possible, because time does not equal preparation. We want the big picture, we want to get it fast, we want to get those details fast, and we want to have just more time for our life. And maybe you start looking at the big picture of this material. Maybe it's not as hard as you originally thought. Maybe you're seeing things that other people around you don't see because you're looking at things, looking at this material a different way. They didn't watch this video, so looks like you got a leg up on them. You aren't going to let your teacher play you because you know the big picture. You're welcome. So there are more details on how this works. Those were my 3 points. So again, it's going to be time does not equal preparation. We need to be speedy. We need to make sure we're looking at the big picture. These are the big concepts. And to fulfill these big concepts, it can get a lot more detailed. It can get a lot more specific. And throughout the rest of this series, I'm going to make sure to outline all that for you guys so that you guys can have more time in your life to lead a more purposeful life, not worry so much about school taking up all your time, and just be excited about who you're going to be, because you're going to be more capable as a person when you have more time. It's not dedicated to this sinkhole. And with time, you can do a lot of good things. So let's make sure that we have time to do those good things. Stay updated with all these videos that I have coming in this series. I'm going to make sure to help to bring you guys the best value that I can, and I hope it helps. So I'll see you guys in the next video.
I think the girls with their nails done now.